What if the key to excelling in tech isn't coding but a scientific way of thinking? Welcome to PhD with Woman on It, Hack the Future. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD Positivity Hack delivered will be by our guest, Grizel Reyes Rios. Topic: How a scientific background prepares you for a tech career. Episode 176 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my mojo, and empathy is critical to tech career. First, let me mention what's been happening in the world of technology and women in tech. Hooray to our former PhD guest Elizabeth Naumowski for being the opening keynote speaker at Wine, Women and Wealth event hosted by Wine Sisters. Your passion for financial literacy and empowering women makes you the perfect voice to kick off these inspiring events and many more events. A huge congratulations to our another PhD guest Naila Beth Caudell for being one of the USA delegates for Women in Tech Global Summit that will take place at the World Expo in Osaka, Japan from April 23rd to 25th. We wish you all the best, Naila, as you represent technology and economic innovations at this incredible global event. Finally, join Vasiliki Dalakari for an empowering and inspiring day at the Women Tech Makers event happening on March 22nd. This event will be packed with tech talks, networking opportunities, and mentoring sessions, all designed to empower and connect. Now let's go back to our topic: how a scientific background prepares you for a tech career. In this episode of PhD, we'll have a conversation with Grizel Reyes Rios, a chemist turned data engineer, to explore how problem solving, analytical thinking, and research skills make STEM professionals a natural fit for the tech industry. From earning a PhD in chemistry in Germany to transitioning into tech data engineering and machine learning in Mexico, Grace will share her journey of career reinvention, the challenges of breaking into technology, and the importance of representation, especially for Latinas in STEM. Whether you're considering a transition into tech or looking to leverage your scientific background in new ways, this conversation will leave you inspired. So, Grace, where in the world are you joining us from today?
Hi, Beata. Actually, so first, thank you very much for the invitation. I really feel honored for the invitation here, and I am joining from Mexico City.
Beautiful location. How is the weather with you today?
Yeah, I mean, I started to feel in the spring. I think that we are around 26, 27 degrees, and we are reaching almost 29 degrees Celsius. We are in Celsius degrees.
That's quite hot. I'm joining
Yes.
from TCI Grand Turk, and it's quite hot. However, this morning it was very cold because we are getting the north winds for the last couple of days. So let's delve deep into the conversation, Greece. How did your scientific background provide unique skills or perspectives that helped you transition into technology?
Well, this is a very good question. Actually, how the scientific background helped you to transition into a tech career? I think that one of the principal skills is that the scientific career turned you into three principal skills. I think that one of the principal is how the scientific method helped you to shape your for example, to vision. I think the scientific method allows you to create, for example, a scientific approach to every aspect of your career. Not only the career in a scientific way, but also, for example, into tech. Why? Because, for example, you can approach, for example, to the observation, to create questions, to create a hypothesis. But more beyond, like, for example, they speak very technical. I wanted to speak more, for example, into the soft skills.
Mhm.
We'll say in terms that, for example, in terms of the soft skills, for example, you can develop negotiation skills that as well, like, for example, particularly a resilient mindset. Why a resilient mindset? Because if we speak, for example, from the terms of the scientific method that I was telling you about like a couple of minutes ago, for example, the observation, the question, everything, as well, like, for example, create hypotheses, that you do some experimentation, that is creating some experiences, and that creates you like a resilient mindset that, for example, start to create how you can start to create, for example, okay, if that experience create, for example, like, for example, is that experience, I obtain that result, so that means that I start to create several experiences, that how I can start to create some resilience to overcome certain situations, based not only in my career, but also in my own life. And that will create you, for example, particularly in the technology, because the technology is an area that you have to shape your mind to adapt very quickly. And that is the same into the scientific. So that is like two different paths that you have to adapt very quickly, and that you have to create a mind that you have to adapt and to create resilience, that goes like hand by hand. I think that that is something that I will appreciate always from my scientific career, that create me that two particularly soft skills, that I can adapt very quickly to the changes, and I can also be create a very resilient, that I can do a transition very fast from the scientific into the tech career, that actually I shape completely into the tech career that I am developed nowadays since almost 8 years ago.
8 years, so it's
Yes.
a long time. But what was that aha moment for you when you decided, well, technology is so exciting?
Yeah, that is as well a very good question. That was when I was doing I, for a very, just to give you a small context, I studied chemistry in Mexico. And when for example, I got the opportunity just after I finished my bachelor degree, I get the opportunity to get to do a PhD in chemistry in Germany. And when I was doing my PhD in chemistry, particularly in terms of the computational chemistry and some electrochemistry, I was doing, for example, several of the computational chemistry. And that was the aha moment that I say, okay, that was the moment that I decided, okay, I think that I was like really having some doubts if I want to do like continue into the chemistry area, or, for example, doing more into the computational area. So that was the aha moment that I say, okay, I think that I wanted to take the bold decision to turn into the computation area, and then I decided to, for example, to go into a master degree that was focused completely into material science, and that gave me the path to go into computational area. But I mean, that was focused more into material science, but that was completely to turn my path into a computational area that was based completely into data science and machine learning. And I was still doing chemistry somehow, but I will say that turns my 100 degree my path from chemistry into a tech area completely. And was completely into, I will say, turn into a chemistry. I will say into the PhD and into a master's degree in German.
So did you know that the term data science was first coined in 1960, but it wasn't until the 2010 that it became one of the first and the most sought after fields. It's amazing how your journey aligns with this global shift, Greece.
Yes, yes. I didn't know that.
You wrote your first lines of code at 15, though. Tell us
Yes.
about that.
Yes. Actually, this is something really curious because when I would say that I started to code when I was in high school, when I was only with 15 years old. That was in a very old language that calls Delphi. And actually, but that was really strange because at that time I didn't consider, for example, a career in, for example, in computer science or like, for example, in computational engineering. But I will say that was in high school, and I was started to go in Delphi because was not very difficult. Was a very, I will say, you can code that there was a human approachable language that you can code with a what was even has a very human approachable UI that you can code very easily. And for example, I was very happy to code during my high school afternoons, and I even do some kind of projects that you can offer to the professors, and we do some for example, to show projects to the parents and to the directors in the high school. And I remember actually one of my professors tell me, "Hey, you can go, for example, to go into computer science if you are interested, for example, for the university and so on." But no, at that moment, what captivated me completely was the chemistry instead of the computer science. But then, after, for example, almost I will say 10 years after, I decided to return into the computer science by a very different way, instead of, for example, doing the traditional path. After that, after the bachelor, going to into the university, and then after the master's degree, and so on. So I will say that it was like got frozen during the high school, and then 10 years after my chemistry path, then I returned into my second passion, that was the computer science, with a master's degree that nowadays I can still follow during this with a master's degree, and then going on now in my career part in Mexico.
Well, there is some fun fact involved. The first programming language, Fortran, was created in 1957 for scientific and engineering applications. So science and tech have always been intertwined.
Yes.
However, I wanted to ask you, why did you choose Germany? Did you speak some German, or what was the reason behind choosing Germany as your test bed for your career?
Well, that is also a fun fact. Is like, I will say, I always feel connected with Germany. I mean, nowadays I speak German. I will say not perfectly because to be honest, yes, it's not a super easy language to talk or to learn. But I will say I always feel connected to Germany since I was in high school. I started to learn some German. I always feel fascinated by the country, by the culture, and even when I was during the university, I took some German language courses, and I just feel fascinated by the culture. And one of the principal, I will say, advantage is that when I finished my bachelor degree, I was applying to different scholarships. So I was applying, for example, for the United States. I was applying for example, even to China. I was applying for different parts in Europe, that I was thinking, okay, I need to find a place where I can do for example, my postgraduate studies. That, for example, I can do a master's degree or a PhD. And as a fun fact, the only place that I got a full scholarship to study, in this case, the PhD, was Germany. So I will say that was more like a destiny that you can say, okay, yeah,
This
was
is
more as
it.
I said. Yeah,
Well, Germany is one of the top countries in the world for scientific research, producing
yeah.
over 100 Nobel laureates. How did being in that environment influence you, and which city were you in?
Well, the first city that I was in was Hamburg.
Hamburg.
And yeah, Hamburg.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
Beautiful
and
Hanseatic town. I have to say that I've been to Hamburg. It's an amazing city, very international.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what about later? Did you change your base?
Yes, yes. Actually, the first city, as you say, was Hamburg. Was really, really beautiful, and I would say that at that time my professor was a junior professor, and then with the same professor, we changed to Erlangen, that was in the south part of Germany, that is near to Munich, and at that time was almost the 3 years of the PhD. But then I changed to another city. I would say that I was around overall on Germany. That actually in Erlangen was the aha moment when I decided to took the bold decision to, in this case, for example, to change to computer science, and that was when I changed to Bochum. Bochum is a city that when I actually pursued the master degree in the Ruhr University of Bochum, that is near to Cologne, and is actually in the middle of Germany on the west part.
Excellent. So let's go back a step. You mentioned computational chemistry was
Yes.
your gateway into technology. Can you explain what that means? What exactly does it entail?
Yes. Well, in that case, computational chemistry, what I was applying was, in that case, for example, the what I was more on the PhD was applying the computational chemistry means, for example, doing experiments and mostly analysis of the experiments that I was pursuing by algorithms or by the computer. In this case, I was particularly doing analysis to the electrochemistry, applying to material science. In this case, we were doing a lot of electrochemistry that was, for example, doing material science, applying by electricity, or, for example, doing electrocells, and particularly the analysis that we were doing, that how much electricity, for example, can the electrocells can produce, or, for example, the material itself was done by the algorithms on the computer. And that was the reason that several of these analyses was done by statistical analysis, or, for example, machine learning. That was the reason that was my aha moment, because all these statisticals was done by, for example, some um, predictions that we have to carry out, or I have to carry out, and a lot of as well statistical analysis that was approaching several with coding, and as well with predictive analysis that I was remembering, for example, what I was doing during my university, or, for example, even during high school. That was the reason that was my aha moment that I really remembered, and I decided to pursue more like a career on that area, that, for example, just staying into the chemistry, no?
Excellent. So apparently, computational chemistry was used to model the COVID-19 virus, helping
Yes.
scientists develop vaccines in record time. It's a perfect example of how science and tech save lives. So
Yes.
transitioning from chemistry to data engineering must have been challenging. What was the hardest part of that shift, and how did you overcome it?
Well, I would say that overcome was well. Actually, I would say that the once that I transitioned into the master's degree helped me a lot. Particularly, I will say um, maybe the biggest challenge was to start coding to return to the coding part. The master's degree helped me a lot, particularly with the coding and particularly all the algorithmic part that you have to the I would say the fundamentals of computer science. But I will say that, for example, once that I finished my master's degree and I started working into the industry was the hardest part, particularly because I would say my fundamentals, I was not feeling like completely prepared, like having like the bachelor's degree since the beginning, no, like or like the engineering part. And I will say that to overcome that part, because after the master's degree, I will say I went into the industry part in Germany. Then I returned to Mexico, and something that I did is like prepare by myself with all the coding completely. I will say that I started from zero again. So I already have it from the master, but I will say that I prepare by myself, like I starting to do algorithms, or for example coding challenge, or for example into the ones that I started working, like for example like learning on the job. I think that that is the most important part, learning on the job.
Learning on the job, figuring out, and curiosity is critical for somebody who's considering career in tech. The
Yes.
term data engineering only became mainstream in the last decade, but it's now one of the fastest growing jobs in tech. What advice would you give to someone making a similar transition?
Well, the transition to data engineering, I will say that is fascinating. I think that is one of my biggest passion, and one advice that I will tell to the people who wants to do it is like, um, first, you have to have a good fundamentals on the algorithmic part, particularly on data structures I mean, more than algorithms itself is on the data structures. Um, and I don't want to sound too technical, but the people also know that nowadays it's also very important to know how to code in Python and SQL. Also, particularly SQL is one of the particularly most of the important language that you have to manipulate, because it's to manipulate for the databases as well for the data warehouses. And I will say there is like several people actually nowadays has created roadmaps how to transition into data engineering. I will say that there is no a particular a specific path how to do it, because there are people who, for example, are starting into the software engineering to turn into data engineers, or there are people who are coming, for example, from B data science to turn into data engineering, or there are people who, for example, coming from even, for example, like me, like for example, are coming from natural science, or for example law, that is turning into the data engineering. So a part of the data structures, Python and SQL, it's important that they know the fundamentals of databases, the fundamentals of data warehouses, and I will say that that will be the first part. And particularly start by themselves. And I think that there are several courses offline that I can also provide some of those links if you want to add me, for example, on LinkedIn, or for example on some of the or by email, that for example, and just started by yourself. And particularly if you are like, for example, on a job that has some data, you can actually start to do it by yourself, because it's not that difficult. It's just like you want to start to work with that data and start to do some analysis little by little, to start think how you can get the analysis to make it faster for analytics.
You've worked in both Germany and Mexico, two very different cultural and professional landscapes. How did
Yes.
those experiences shape your perspective on tech and your identity as Latina in tech?
Yeah. Well, what can I say? Well, is I think both cultures have very different perspective. I will say that Germany shaped me. I will say that on the very structure, on a very structured way of thinking, on a very disciplined, so with a very hard discipline, particularly on the job. And when I returned to Mexico, I also applied that very hard discipline and way of thinking. But here in Mexico, we also have a very hard discipline on the job and also way of thinking. But how we do the things is a little bit different because I will say that the contrast is that Mexico still need to do to polish maybe in some, I will say, difference on the technologies. I will say that, for example, Germany has a little more advanced technologies in some way, and Mexico is still a little bit behind on some of that technologies. So in that case, we are also very hardworking. We are also have the discipline to do it. But I will say that we have to work a little bit harder on have the same advances and also on have the same advance on that technologies. Um, and I will say that uh, have the advantage and but in that on that way or in that matter, we also have the advantage to do some innovation because there is some room of innovation. Sometimes in Germany, the innovation is a little bit not that not that open, but in Mexico, the innovation there is some room or there is a lot of room to do it, particularly to bring the gap close, or in that case, to close the gap on that technologies. So it's very different. So one is like discipline versus the innovation that you can do to close the gap on those technologies that is remaining.
Would you consider going back to Europe, or are you happy with Mexico?
Well, it's a good question. I will say that at the beginning, when I returned to Mexico, so I have been now here for almost 6 years. At the beginning, I really want to go back to Europe, so I never closed that possibility. But I will say that now I am very happy in Mexico uh, because actually Mexico has been giving me a lot of satisfaction in my career. I never imagined to have the career that I have now without Mexico, to be honest.
Mm. Well, apparently Latinas make up only 2% of the STEM workforce in the US. But your story is proof that representation matters. How do you hope to inspire others to become Latina in STEM?
Mm, like, well, to be prayer, I will say that it's very important. Like to be Latinas in STEM is very, very important, particularly because there is like misrepresentation. I think that we are still a lot because I think that most of the programs nowadays is to bring more Latinas in tech. That is very important. But I think that there is also very important to also have programs how to keep Latinas in tech because sometimes it's harder to stay because actually there is some statistics that say that most of the people or most of the Latinas sleep at, at 30 or 35 because sometimes it's a hard area to stay because maybe there are it's not that easy to, for example, to combine the life, for example, the life that you have with your personal life, with your with your with your work life. So it's important, I think, to have also programs that how to keep Latinas both in tech, a part of a part of that of those ones, how to bring more Latinas into tech.
You've said that returning to Mexico felt like relearning how to be Mexican. What was that reintegration process like, and how did it impact your career journey?
Yes, yeah, it was a very important lesson for me. Well, um, was very important because well, I spent almost 8 years of my life in Germany, and then I returned to Mexico when I was 32, if I remember correctly. And I spent most of my 20s in Germany. So, and I never worked here before. So I just finished my bachelor degree, and then I come back, and then I just went to Germany, and then I started actually to return to Mexico and search for a job from zero, from scratch. And then I wanted to go into tech in an area that I didn't know at all here in my own country. No, so in that case, I have to learn how to look for a job into tech here in Mexico, and also I have to relearn how to be a Mexican again, the way of how Mexicans work in that area. So was really hard at the beginning, because how to adapt to the way of thinking of Mexico, how they work, how they deliver projects, for example, how they, for example, manage certain deadlines, how they manage, for example, the for example, the everyday life with the colleagues. So that was a hard lesson at the beginning, but I think that nowadays I feel much more identified with my colleagues, where I feel um, much more happier, particularly with the way of thinking, with the way of life. And I feel more, particularly because these contracts that I was thinking, that I was mentioned about, how you can, for example, the discipline versus the innovation that is between the two cultures, between the German cultures versus the Mexican culture.
Mexico is one of the fastest growing tech hubs in Latin America, with cities like Guadalajara being called the Silicon Valley of Mexico. I'm not sure whether I called the name right. How did that environment support your transition? And do you work in a startup now, or do you work in a big tech company? Tell us about your current career.
Well, this is a very good question. Well, I started to working in a small company, and my current career is like, for example, I started to work a small from a small company, and then went from a small company work into big tech. Was growing very fast. And from the big tech, then I started to work into biggest company. So grow very, 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 very fast. So I think that also because I was also changing a lot. I mean, sometimes I also tend to the people, okay, maybe I am that my career can be an example. That can be an example for some people, that maybe is not the same for other people, because there are some people that, for example, prefer to stay in the same company for a really long time. But at least for me, was that every change represent, like, for example, a new challenge, represent an opportunity to grow, represent an opportunity to, for example, to learn a new technology. And I was very happy to ever change. I will say that I will not change anything on my career. My current career is that at the moment I am working more on a personal projects. Actually, at the moment, I am, for example, looking for a new challenge, particularly to combine the data engineering with artificial intelligence. And actually, I am now part of something that you call Snowflake SME program that is more around certification. But I will say in the past, how, for example, I am also really surprised how I changed from for working into small startups up to big techs or very big companies in just, I will say, 7 years that I have been here in Mexico. That was the reason that from the last questions I said that I cannot imagine my career happening without Mexico.
Uh, so you're not now working in data engineering and machine learning, and I was wondering how do you see these fields evolving? And what role do you think scientists will play in shaping future of AI, machine learning, data engineering?
I think scientists will play a key role on this one, particularly because of the mindset. Actually, I will say that that was the reason that actually you call the people who do the particularly the AI data scientists. But they are not alone. They are together with the data engineers and together with also with the machine learning engineers, and also with the data analysts. They are not like alone, but particularly if you talk about the scientists, for example, like me, we are coming from a natural science background, that they want to pursue a career in tech, they have to be completely sure that that they are can be completely sure that they can play a key role, just that they prepare, for example, on the fundamentals of statistics, computer science, and particularly machine learning to get into tech, to pursue is they want, particularly on the artificial intelligence area.
Here's a thought: machine learning algorithms were inspired by the way the human brain works. So,
Yes.
in a way, science is still at the heart or at the brain of tech innovation. How do you see that connection growing?
Um, well, in this case, as I am not a completely expert on the field. I mean, but in this case, for example, the people who is like, for example, data scientists, who is machine learning, I will say that artificial intelligence is what is looking for, is to imitate the machine, to imitate the functionality of the human brain to teach to the machine. But I will say that you can teach that to a machine up to certain limit, but never replace the human brain completely.
Absolutely. The human brain is critical to the future of technology. So, what would be the advice you would give to younger self if you could bring these memories back? And what would you advise yourself?
Mm, I will say that I will advise to myself, mm, if I go back, for example, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, I will say that trust my own expertise. That it is important to speak out loud the achievements, but not only mine achievements. I will give this advice to the audience itself. It's important that you speak out loud your achievements and don't wait for validations, because this build confidence on yourself.
And what would you say to those who would like to follow your footsteps? Because we know that there are lots of amazing role models. Ada Lovelace was the first computer programmer, in the 1800s. So, what would you say to those who are doubting in their capability? Whether they are working, they are dreaming of becoming a biologist or chemist or whatever scientific field they may dream of.
I would like to say that to be bold and do a continuous learning. And I will like to repeat the own advice that I just give to myself to them to trust your own expertise because and don't wait for this validation, because as long as you are bold and trust your own expertise, the confidence will grow, because that means that you own that experience, you own that learning, you own that knowledge that you have in yourself, and you can teach that expertise to other people. And for example, that also bring you confidence to overcome certain situation, to overcome certain critical, for example, not only situation, but I would say overcome certain critical, for example, teaching that you can also give to other people to trust you as a leader on that area or that field.
Well, you strike me as a very confident person. Do you feel confident?
I feel that I feel confident now, but I didn't feel confident for a really long time, for several years. But I think that now is much better.
So, what was your secret sauce? How did you apply that confidence into your career?
I feel that I mean that one secret was the several changes that I had during my whole career, particularly the change from chemistry, that was like a safe path that I was having, because when, for example, once that you enter the chemistry world, everybody tell you, okay, you have to do the bachelor degree, then a master, then a PhD. So, and then, for example, go into, so it's a very traditional path. But once that, for example, I was even into it during the PhD, and then in the PhD, I turned into a completely new path that was computer science. And then I started to, was hard at the beginning, but I started to build a career on that. I think that I started to get confidence and trust on myself, despite the fact that I had several difficult situations sometimes.
Greece, I have to say that if it wasn't for you throwing yourself out there, I mean, this is one of the reasons we are here together, joined together, because we are part of the Women Tech Makers initiative, and you volunteered to speak at our talks, and you do so much to actually improve yourself every day. And here is a nice question from Olga Vasina. Great show. Do you think the different education systems in Germany and Mexico impact innovative approaches? That's a very good one. Thank you,
Yeah,
Olga.
yeah, that's a very, yes, I think impacts that. Yeah, well, I think, for example, in my case, I only have I am not expert for the whole system education in Germany, because in my case, I only experienced the education at the master's degree level or the PhD level. And I think that is very similar to the master's degree and the PhD level, maybe in Mexico. But at least maybe the approach, for example, the initiatives that, for example, they have maybe at the, for example, high school level. So, for example, is different. So I think Germany has maybe initiatives that encourage more, for example, discipline or, for example, innovation since a younger age instead of maybe Mexico, no? Or, for example, in Mexico, maybe private school has in more innovation programs instead of public schools, no? Is something that is something that we have to bring to the table. That, for example, in Mexico, the difference between the public and the private schools there is a very big gap, a very big gap between both of those kind of schools.
Well, I think it's very universal. Obviously, we know that public schools have, some constraints. However, let's not compare each other, because as Oprah Winfrey says, if you look at what you have in life, you will always have more. If you look at what you don't have in life, we'll never have enough. Thank you so much, Grace. I'm giving you over to our lovely Jamil, who's dreaming of becoming a Woman Tech Maker ambassador one day. So I'm sure you will be able, Grace, to lead her through that and maybe even mentor Jamil. Jamil, over to you. Please carry on.
Thank you, Beata, for your introduction. So, hello everyone. We are here with our incredible guest, Grisel Reyes, talking about how a scientific background prepares you for a tech career. So, Grisel, we've seen how a strong scientific mindset can open doors in tech, but what about the specific challenges women face in career advancement? So, especially in fields like tech and entrepreneurship. So, with all that in mind, what advice would you give to females to help their career or start an entrepreneurial journey?
Yes. I think that I will repeat, well, not repeat, but I think that I want to give one particularly that have a resilient mindset. I think that that is one of the most important advices together with your own expertise.
And what are the top 3 soft skills all career-driven females, in your opinion, should have?
I would like to give continuous learning. Also, like be bold. And the last one is also have a support system that is together with have a great network.
Also, we are really highlighting how problem solving is a cornerstone of both science and tech. Grisel, with your unique experience, what's your go-to strategy when you encounter a complex problem?
Yes. Well, I always follow the scientific method that in just a couple of steps is I do observation, I question myself, I create a hypothesis, I do an experiment, I do a report, or in this case, I do some data collection, I do a report, and then I give a conclusion.
That's nice. None of us are able to achieve success without some help along the way. Is there a particular person who you are grateful towards who helped get you to where you are?
Yes, there are actually not only one, but the person that give me this, that actually helped me a lot in my career. I think that are two, well, both of them are Germans. I really want to thank you, Dr. Rebecca Janisch and Herr Woolrich, who believe in me. And actually, I think that I wanted to thank you for be who I am today.
I'm curious, are there any exciting new projects you are currently working on that you can share with us today?
Yes. One actually I mentioned during the
Mm-hmm.
with Beata, that is to be actually part of the Snowflake as a Snowflake SME program. That is very, very nice to be part of to prepare and help with the certification of the Snowflake, and also a personal project, particularly to give a deep dive into more into artificial intelligence, particularly more into computer vision.
Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "Women are like tea bags. We don't know our true strength until we are in hot water." In life, how are you in hot water, Giselle? How are you brewing?
Yes, I think that the most particular situation was when I come back to Mexico, when that I mentioned during as well with Beata, that was started from zero, uh, from Germany to Mexico, and I think that was the most difficult situation. And how I am brewing, I think that I was able to I was able to overcome that challenge, even when I was put in a very hot water.
That's nice. And what is the number one book you can sit and think, oh, I wish I read before I started my career?
I want to recommend the book by Alma Obama, and then life happens. And this book is was written by Alma Obama, who is a sister from former president of the United States, Barack Obama. In this case, she has a very different life, but in this case, I feel very identified with her because she spent 16 years of her life in Germany studying and working before she returned to Africa. She was born in Kenya, and she is doing as well several of social commitment to bring education to misrepresented people, girls in Africa, and I feel actually represent like a connection with her because she spent a very significant time of her life in Mexico, like in Germany, like me, and then she returned to her home, like me, for example, in this case, she in Africa, me in Mexico, and also trying to, for example, to do some social connection, for example, with her people in Africa. And for example, myself, I trying to, every time that I can, I trying to do or participate in social program to bring more girls into STEM or computer science here in Mexico.
Let's imagine that you could meet anyone in the world for private breakfast. Who would it be and where would you choose to meet?
Yeah, I will like to meet my great grandmother. In this case, because I didn't have, I just have the opportunity to meet her when I was a baby. But in this case, I met her because she was part of the Mexican Revolution, and I really want to meet her, maybe during breakfast, and that she tell me some of the amazing stories that she has during this time of the very important Mexican history.
Beautiful answer. And for our last question, can you please give us your favorite life lesson quote?
Yes, of course. My favorite lesson quote is from Friedrich Nietzsche. Actually, I wanted to read it. I have it here. It's like, he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. I feel really identified with this quote, particularly because I think that every time that you wake up in the morning and you have a purpose, you don't have you can just work on that dream or goal every day of your life.
This has been an incredibly insightful. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and highlighting the power of scientific mindset in tech. And now to wrap things up, I hand it to you back to Beata Young.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamila.
Thank you, Jamil, and thank you, Greece. It's really amazing because I've never heard about Alma, Obama's sister. So it's really fascinating. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your great grandmother. Maybe one day you will even publish a book about her life. Tell us why do you feel it would be so beneficial to you to meet her and have that private breakfast with your great grandmother?
Yes, well, it's because she left her home very young, with only 15 years old when she met my great grandfather, and because she belonged to a particular group of women who were the companions of the soldiers, because my great grandfather belongs to the army, to the Mexican army during this Mexican Revolution in 1910. Was at the beginning of the 20th century. And in this case, they were traveling from northern Mexico to the south of Mexico. And in this case, they were like traveling from into every town, to every small town. And I don't know, sometimes I was thinking, okay, why they were having for breakfast, or what they were having, for example, for meals, like for example traveling like every day to different town, or what was the army at that point in time in Mexico, because actually that revolution changed everything in Mexico at that time.
Amazing journey, amazing life story, and that gives us also an insight into your family roots and exploring the world, which runs deeply in your family, as it seems. Grisel, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us. Your work is not only transforming the digital landscape, but also paving the way for a more sustainable future and opening doors for those who are dreaming of tech career. And that's it from episode 176 of PhD Livestream with Greece Reyes Rios. To stay updated and ensure you never miss a positivity hack delivered, follow Woman on It and turn on notifications to be alerted once a video has been released. Next week, we will be joined by Jody Krango, and we'll be talking about Beyond the Noise, the hidden power of sound in marketing and business. As always, our positivity quote comes from Positive Thinking Only and goes, look for something positive in each day, even if some days you have to look a little harder. And thank you so much to our lovely audience, Olga Vasina, for your question. And finally, to everybody, Maya Angelou left us with this beautiful quote: if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, if you can't change your career, change your attitude. Today is your day to hug the future, hug the positivity you want. Thank you.
Thank you.